Have you picked any animals and eat it then?
No, I encourage you not to do that too. So once you get over your fear, you start to appreciate how beautiful they are. If you cook them, you have to cut the head off. You boil them for 3 to 5 minutes.
Is there like a need to be a systemic design change?
You may drive a couple species directly to extinction.
How do you know it's happy? Hi everybody, welcome to today's episode. So today we are accompanied by Nat and Laurenz from USA. Would you prefer to eat cricket for a breakfast or hamburger? Nathan is gonna share something about this food sustainability. Okay, so Nathan, would you be able to go and share with the audience what you do and what gets you into this?
So I currently work for Karang Foodie, doing R&D as a snail farmer, but most of my professional experience has been as an insect farmer. So insects are a very sustainable source of protein, and I started this way back as a child. I fell in love with insects. I grew up in a very small town, nothing like Singapore, 1,300 people only. And so lots of time I spent outside and lots of time alone. And there was not that much to do. There was lots of animals to look at though, and birds are fun, but they're too far away.
To catch?
Well, no, you look at them. You just look at them. Birds are hard to catch. They're fast. They fly.
Okay.
Plants
That's why
are cool.
you decided for insects?
Exactly. Insects you can catch. They're not too far away.
Okay.
I have bad vision, so I can go look at them close
How
up.
young were you when you started to, I don't know, put everything in your mouth?
We'll get to the eating. I didn't eat insects until I was maybe 16. I developed this passion, so I always loved insects. But I also realized that there are real problems in this world. Right now in 2024, around 1 in 10 people are still undernourished, and our current agricultural system is just not holding up. So besides for people not getting enough food, it's also one of the main polluters and drivers of greenhouse gas emissions, and drivers of deforestation, which is especially close to my heart because all the insects live in these forests that are getting deforested. So I started to reckon with these big problems, and I came across a solution which involves insects. So you eat insects because they are quite sustainable. And so I came across this when I was about 16, and I found a 200-page report by a man named Arnold van House to the United Nations about why we should eat insects. I read the whole thing, front to back, and then the first thing I did, I was convinced. And so
200 pages?
Yes, 200 pages got me. I was convinced at the first page, but I had to keep reading to be sure. So I went outside and I caught an insect and then I ate it.
The other question is, I think Dare was very curious, what animal, what insect is your first insect? And how does it taste?
My first insect was a cricket. I just go outside, I lift up a rock, I find a little cricket. So I lift up a rock, I find a cricket, and then I put it in a frying pan. And I burnt the thing to a crisp. There was nothing but ash left. So it just tasted like burnt cricket.
Okay, so you need to medium rare.
Yeah. So now what I've found the best way to prepare insects is you boil them for 3 to 5 minutes, and that cooks them. And then you put them in a fry pan with a little bit of oil for about 30 seconds. Olive oil,
like,
vegetable oil.
It's gonna be a menu.
Recipe, yeah.
Yeah. So fry them up, and then that gives them a nice texture. It freshens up the outside, and so we've cooked and then prepared and then lovely to eat.
So for beginner, would you recommend them to try crickets or something easy?
Probably should find something prepared already. So there's lots of products that will soon be hitting the market here in Singapore. Singapore just had 16 insects announced as approved for edible consumption, which is fantastic. So one of them is cricket.
Okay.
Other ones are mealworms, silkworm pupae, and all insects that have been traditionally eaten for quite a long time. And so Singapore looked for history going back many years of people eating these, and then that's how they chose the 16 to approve.
Well, I had my first taste of insects when I was having a vacation in Thailand. So I think there's a lot of where Singaporeans get, their adventure.
It was quite interesting because they were like, okay, it's like a, like a cart, and you just like, which one do you want? Okay, then after that they were just
like, okay, mealworms, scorpion, and so on. Yeah. So to that, right? I mean, I think Singaporeans are known to be foodies, right? I mean, we love to experiment and experience all sorts of cuisine, but insects, not really. On behalf of
Exotic
Singaporeans,
food.
yeah, not really high on our list. But there are also other alternative protein, right? Food source. Why insect? What makes it so compelling and as well as important, right? As a new source of food.
Yeah, very good question. So there are lots of alternative proteins. I mentioned the problems with traditional agriculture, but there's many ways to solve these. Insects is one, and I think it shouldn't be the only solution, but it should be one of the solutions. We're also looking at things like cultivated meat, where instead of growing a cow and then harvesting a steak, you just take a couple of cells from a cow and then grow a steak. You skip the cow, you only clone these cells in a bioreactor, and then you get this perfectly good steak without the process of a cow. The problem is it takes lots of bioreactors and there's technical difficulties, so it's still in the process. Another one is fungi or algae you can cultivate and then consume, and it contains a lot of the micronutrients that traditional agriculture provides and our traditional meats provide. But I really like insects, and insects have a benefit where they can consume our food waste. So food waste is another pretty significant problem, as a lot of the food that is produced isn't eaten by humans and it ends up in the garbage or the landfill. Insects can divert this from the landfill, and when it decays in the landfill, it releases methane. If you feed it to insects, it doesn't release as much methane, and the insects are able to convert it into high quality protein again, so it's not wasted.
Which is the worst insect? Maybe for a beginner, right? I think I don't mind trying, but which one is the one that I should avoid for a beginner?
Okay, you should try everything, but the one that I've had the worst experience with myself is centipedes are not insects, but they're close to insects. They have lots of legs, they have big jaws. The jaws are full of venom, and it can be quite bad if you get bit, so don't get bit. And if you cook them, you have to cut the head off so you don't eat the venom, and then you cook them
What
and then
about
you
the
eat
legs?
them. The legs you just eat.
We eat the legs.
You eat the legs.
It's like eating prawn, maybe. I
Can
don't
you
know. Some
describe
people.
the taste?
Bad.
Just bad.
Now, my favorite insect to eat is a grub. So they're big white beetle larvae that live underground, and they look really gross. I'll admit that they look squishy and large, soft, mushy, white beetle larvae. So the look is not great, but you cook in the method that I told you about earlier.
With the oil?
With the oil. You boil for a little bit, then you throw in some oil. Such a nice flavor. It's like a rich, nutty flavor, like a creamy almond kind of. Sometimes a little bit of shrimp flavor in there too.
Shrimp flavor.
Yeah.
Where's this shrimp flavor come from?
Insects are quite closely related to shrimp. So shrimp just live in the water, insects live on land, but similar.
Interesting.
Wow.
So, I think so because in Singapore we are a city-state, right? I think then, just now we talk about allowing the different insects as food source in Singapore, and because we need to have food security in Singapore, right? Sustainable food source, but is insect farming sustainable in Singapore? Because we are a city-state. Where do you think it is going in terms of this?
So insect farming is far better than most forms of agriculture, far better suited for Singapore, because it takes very little space and relatively few inputs. So insects are very small, and you have to grow a lot of them to equal a full meal for yourself.
Yes,
but they grow very, very fast. So black soldier flies, which is an insect species that I farmed, in less than a month, you can go through a generation and a half, maybe even 2 generations. So a cow you want to eat, you have to grow for 2 years, and then you're able to eat it. But insects, in 2 months, you can harvest twice already. And each female will lay 300 eggs. So your population growth is exponential and it just skyrockets. So you're able to collect a lot of insects in a pretty small space.
Okay, let's say in comparison to our meal, how much insects is equivalent to a meal, say
to get
lunch?
the same carbohydrate and protein and all that, yeah.
I don't know about counting the individual insects. We usually harvest by weight because we'll have millions and millions of insects in our facility at any one time. The facility that I was working at last, we would go through about 1 million insects every week. And so it didn't make sense to count every single one. We would just estimate based on weight.
So per meal, full enough to sustain? How heavy? I mean, how much grammage is it?
How much grams is your typical meal, eh?
Oh, it's the same kind of size?
It's the same.
Like rice and vegetable and everything else?
So you can just replace the meat. So insect is
the
like a
meat.
meat replacement. Yes. So it has the protein, has more micronutrients than your
Okay.
typical hamburger.
So like a
So-
handful perhaps, right?
Yeah. Just if you make stir fry, just replace the meat with insects. If you do, instead of chicken rice, do cricket rice.
Wow,
Okay.
that's hard for my mental to
process,
digest.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's cool.
So we are talking about also sustainable farming. Insect farming is a sustainable way of farming in Singapore. But I think in at least maybe in this part of the world, farming is still pretty traditional. Right, like we go to Indonesia, we go to other parts of Southeast Asia. So is there like need to be a systemic design change in how we do farming in order for this to not just be currently it's like something new, like just a niche, to become something at
business.
scale? Yeah.
There are two main groups that agriculture needs to account for and provide value for. The first group is people, it's you and me, who need to eat every day. We need to eat so much food. And then the second is the environment. So as we are creating crops and creating these protein products, we need to do it in a way that doesn't entirely degrade the environment, both for the insects, for future generations, for people like me who really like spending time outside. We just need to do it in a way that can be sustained over a long period of time. We mention sustainability a lot, but sustainability, I think sometimes we mention it without thinking about what it means, but it means that we need to do it in a way that can be done long term, going all the way into the future. And that means that we need to protect what we have. Our rainforests here, old growth rainforests, are not easy to find. You can't just make a new one. Once that environment is gone, it's gone for good. And you can still get new growth forests. You can still bring back some of those species. But insect species in rainforests especially are pretty limited in geographic range. And so if you cut down a couple acres, a couple of square kilometers of trees, you may drive a couple species directly to extinction. So we need to design our agricultural system in a way that we can produce value for people, produce this protein, produce these micronutrients, but also not at the expense of rainforests. So we can't keep cutting down forests, cutting down natural habitats in order to produce protein. So a way to change that is by incorporating insects, incorporating algae, fungi, things that are a little less traditional, but can be raised in a way that is more sustainable and that impacts the environment less, while still providing all of the value that we need.
In Singapore itself, we have very limited forests and natural wildlife. How is it looking like for our insects in our local context?
Let's
with a
say-
little bit of nature that we have.
Let's say Bukit Timah Natural
nature reserve
Reserve.
and all that. How is our ecosystem like
Have you
here?
picked any animals and eat it then?
No, I encourage you not to do that too. End parks will get mad at you. You can't say that Nathan told you to go outside and eat insects. Do not recommend. So Singapore does a pretty good job of protecting the natural resources it has, and Singapore has some really great biodiversity, and the forests that Singapore has are really nice. So going out there, you can see so many cool insects, so many cool animals. Really recommend getting out there. Sungai Buloh is probably my favorite. Pasir Ris Boardwalk, very nice. Bukit Timah, very nice. So there are these places that you can find if you look for them. You just have to get a little bit away from the hustle and bustle of Singapore.
What is the interesting discovery that you found in Singapore that you never find it anywhere else?
Singapore has many. My favorite is perhaps the yellow-spotted crab spider. It's a quite big spider, it's about this big, and it's bright yellow, and it just kind of ran around. I found it in Sungai Buloh, and it was so cool to see.
How do you came across that?
I was just walking around. It was
by
It's
just
like
chance.
something totally never discovered.
No, I think
like
it's
never
also
seen.
because he's trained to start to
Yeah.
look at details. He
I
is
never
aware.
knew about this.
For us, we went
right.
to Sungai Buloh just to look for the crocodile.
So this famous
The big
crocodile.
size
Yeah,
one
yeah,
is
yeah.
hard
Big
to
enough
miss.
to look at.
The tiny one, I think it's hard to. Yeah.
So you managed to see some very species, local
Yes,
to.
seen some endangered species, some endemic, which is a term that means only found in Singapore, only found here.
Local.
Yes. So very cool to see.
I think the challenge for insects is naturally people have this aversion to it, right? Like, oh, insects, I don't want it near me, I don't want it in my house, you know, I want to be in a, you know, in an air-conditioned place, you know, I have to clean pesticide, getting the pest controller coming and all that. So, I mean, then, but we hear that, you know, the importance of coexisting with them. Any tips? How can a ordinary Singaporean
accept living with them?
And, you know.
So the first thing is just like, look at them. When you immediately see one, don't think I must squish, I must get out, I must shoo away. Just like look at it for a little bit. But if you look at these things, insects are really, really diverse. So there's around 1 million species of insect, which is just so many. How many species of plants do you think there is? Just as a guess.
Endless, I think. Billions.
10,000, 100,000.
So discovered, there's about 400,000.
Okay.
Also discovered, there's about 400,000 different kinds of beetles. Beetles alone, like one specific group of insects. And there's as many beetles as there are plants, different species at least. So crazy diverse, all sorts of different adaptations. They all have legs that look different. They all have wings that have different patterns on them. So if you look closely enough, you start to pick up on these differences and you start to see the intricacies and how special and beautiful insects actually are. So once you get over your fear, you start to appreciate how beautiful they are. Then we can take the step towards, hey, maybe they're useful, maybe they're tasty, but the first one is just getting used to them and appreciating them for what they are.
Wow. So
I think there needs to have a lot of awareness in that sense, right? You know, even whether or not, you know, for you to get to know them in the first place, you know, what does it do, you know, how does it look like, and so on and so forth. But of course, in terms of the food sustainability, can we eat them? Is it poisonous enough? Should I take out the head first, or should I throw the legs, and should I cook it with olive oil or sunflower oil, whatever oil? So these kind of things, it needs to have a lot of education. So when you think about it, how does it, where are we, you know, in Singapore, you know, from your opinion, you know, where are we? How far are we? And
in accepting things, I think
in accepting this, yes, correct.
We're getting there, but you guys are the Singaporeans. I should be asking you this. How is your country coming along? Are you ready to eat insects yet?
It does open up a new category of food, right? And when you come out open a new, you know, category of food, you know, then you have a new cuisine, new recipe. Then that impacts, you know, the F&B world, right? Then there could be, right? We talk about there are different Mediterranean food. We're talking about, you know, whatever type of food. Now, that actually creates more diversity.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Where can Singaporeans find this kind of information?
So right now, a little bit hard to find. So it was just a couple months ago that the 16 insects were approved for human consumption. Before then, not allowed to consume in Singapore, at least not allowed to sell in Singapore. And now it's been approved, but nobody has actually completed the paperwork, at least as of recording this. By the time this goes live, maybe, but nobody's completed the paperwork to start selling them here in Singapore.
What do you expect the food industry is gonna be like in the future? We're just dreaming, right?
Yeah.
With the, you know, with welcoming the 16 insects, right? How will it?
Will it be part of our chai peng, you know, when we
or
order?
Will it be like, you know, salted egg crickets?
Yeah, so my dream for like 1 year from now is that you can go to the supermarket and you can choose a protein bar made from insects instead of made from soy protein or whatever other protein goes into it. And you can go to a high-end restaurant and you can get a silkworm dish if you'd like. So 1 year from now, some insects that you have the option to buy. And then if we dream 10 years from now, what I would really like to see is you go to the supermarket and you have your meats, and then in your meats you have your normal meats, your chicken, your pork, your beef, and then next to that you also have your insects. There's a whole category of insects, there's a category of algae, a category of fungi, all next to each other, and people pick all of them. And so traditional meats will probably be a little bit more expensive, or at least hopefully in comparison, the new meats and meat products will be a little bit lower priced to give people the incentive to switch, but they should taste just as nice, they should look just as nice, and hopefully people will accept them into their diets, and then we can consume just on a weeknight, every day, just
It's pretty exciting, yeah, like snacks and
So
all
it's
that.
also helped the you know, the country moves towards the sustainability aspects as well, you know.
So you are also involved with Jane Goodall Institute Singapore. right? Could you share like what are your, what you do there, and how does it relate to, what you do professionally?
So most of my role with the Jane Goodall Institute is leading nature walks. So around Bukatima, the dairy farm nature park, we go around with groups of students or professionals, and I find cool bugs and point them out. So I foster that culture of appreciation of insects and show them some of the cool appendages, the cool designs, the cool patterns, get them to appreciate nature, appreciate insects, which maybe you've walked by a spider 1,000 times, but if you haven't noticed it's there, or if you've noticed it's there but haven't looked at it, you don't have the same appreciation. So I lead people, and I, as the resident entomologist, also help identify other insects.
There is also a lot of design inspiration from nature, right? I think you mentioned like 1 million insect species, So is there something that we can learn from how nature works?
Of course. So nature has spent millions of years getting to the place that it is today. And so there's a lot of really cool adaptations that we can learn from. When making very small robots, nanorobotics, and even some larger drones, we're taking inspiration from insects. The way insects power their flight is really, really interesting.
Like a project with a black fly, right? Or inspired by a black fly, right?
Yeah, inspired by flies, inspired by bees. And then we can just take some of these design concepts and transition them into robots.
Like those kind of spy movie?
Oh yeah, right, yeah, they put a little thing on the,
Yeah, we can even go a step further, and there's people who are implanting electrodes into the brains of insects. In fact, there's kits you can order online to train a cockroach. And so you implant an electrode into each of its antennae, and then there's an app on your phone, and you can control if the cockroach goes left or right by stimulating parts of its brain. So controlling another living thing's brain and its actions does raise some questions. I'm not an ethicist. I'm not advocating for this technology. I'm making you aware that it exists. Whether we can and whether we should, perhaps different things, as we learned from the Jurassic Park movies. But I do want to mention the ethics of insect farming. So getting back a little bit more on topic, insect farming is, I would say, more ethical than traditional farming. One, because we are not destroying the natural landscapes, but also because insects really like cramped spaces. They like dark spaces, they like to be close together, and they like to eat junk. They like to eat not great things. And so we're able to provide for them an environment that is pretty close to ideal. Whereas with chickens, if we put them in a confined space, or cows, we put them in a confined space, they don't like it. But insects really do like that. And even though we're raising a whole bunch more of them, they have fairly simple nervous systems. And so I feel better about raising and consuming insects than I do raising and consuming pigs.
So I think your point is that we are actually doing far worse, in terms of ethics with what farmed animals, right, out there that we are currently doing, producing and eating. Wow.
Okay, so for those, the one that, enjoy the conversation so far, they want to try and, wanting to try and curious enough, where can they find?
So I will first say, don't find outside. I know that I said that I did that, but that was in the States, very different than here. And I have a degree in entomology, so I know what is poisonous, what is not. So don't find outside, don't cook yourself. But currently, I know that there are a couple companies that are working on the requirements to import insects. So SFA is making sure that the insects that they have are safe and fit for human consumption.
That kind of things, it seems to be like there's potential. The potential is endless, right? If anybody wants to go into startups, or a new business model for those kind of F&B, right?
Yeah, F&B is a whole supply chain, right?
Ice cream-based insects, protein, right? Everybody go for this kind of thing, especially for the health-conscious people as well, right? They can actually go, wow.
Yeah,
does it cost? Does it include some kind of anti-aging factor when we take some proteins from the insects? What are health benefits? I think we need to know about that one.
Anti-aging, perhaps not, although having a good diet is important for you as you age. But insects are very healthy. They have similar levels of protein as traditional meats and higher levels of micronutrients. So insects, you eat the whole thing. A cow, you don't eat the bones, maybe you eat the bones. You can eat whatever you want. But most people, I don't eat the bones, I don't eat the skin, I don't eat the brain, you throw it all out. Insects, you eat the whole thing. no skeleton inside, but they have an exoskeleton on the outside. And the exoskeleton is made of chitin, and it's pretty hard. So you eat this, and you get extra calcium. So you get pretty high benefits of calcium, iron, magnesium, and other micronutrients. So quite healthy for you.
I want to talk also specifically about the conservation of insects in Singapore. So we talk, quite a lot about eating them,
Yes.
but we also heard that insects are important to our ecosystem, right? To the wildlife that we have here, maybe in our environment. So what have Singapore done so far specifically in conservation insects? I mean, we have talked about conservations of other species, but insects, what are we doing? Are we doing enough in Singapore?
To cultivate them, to culture them, and reverse back to us.
Always more to be done. I will say that Singapore has done a pretty nice job. I was very impressed the first time I come here and I see all of the green areas, I see all of the nature parks. Lovely to see. Always more to be done, of course. One of the things to worry about is habitat fragmentation. So this is when habitats are split. So even if you keep most of a forest, but you put a road through the middle, then some insects have a hard time crossing that road. Some animals have a hard time crossing that road. So we need to pay attention to habitat fragmentation as Singapore continues to develop and change. But I have confidence that things will be addressed when we get there.
Okay, but like for us, there are maybe people that are interested in passionate about this area. Where can we start in our own daily lives?
Yeah. So in a sense that if we are not a professional, what can we do?
Yeah.
So you can consider volunteering with many organizations, from Jane Goodall Institute to any others that are involved in nature or even gardening, and then you'll see insects, you'll experience these same things. So anything that gets you outside, gets your hands dirty, gets you in nature, close to the ground, highly recommend getting outside.
Wow.
What is your take about the urban farming, especially Singapore as part of a urban jungle, right? So they develop certain kind of projects near the parks or anything like that. Then they secure certain areas for the residents, to do some kind of gardening. What is your take about that?
I really appreciate giving residents the chance to farm. I grew up on a farm, and a lot of who I am today is because of that experience. And so developing that relationship with these plants, watching them grow and develop, really, really useful. Urban farming, to produce a significant part of your protein or your diet, is much harder, however. The economics of it are just really hard to make work, and so that one I'm a little hesitant to fully endorse, but urban farming on the small scale, you having a little plot of land and getting out there, highly recommend. Even just some herbs in your window. You have a little basil growing in the window and sprinkle it in your dish.
Yeah, of course, we are on the rooftop. It's kind of like outside is a rooftop garden, so we are also trying to plant a bit of herbs and all that.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, for our own consumption. Yeah.
Sometimes we just steal from other neighbors. So.
Yeah. But I think the challenge of Singapore is, you see, even if rooftop gardens and urban farming in a little way, yes, we do our best, in our small ways, right, to bring a bit of that nature back to our daily lives. Maybe we can sustain ourselves also in a little bit in our own ways, to feed ourselves a little bit in our own ways. But how do you see a city like Singapore play a larger role, right? On when we talk about climate change, global warming, the food security is a huge issue globally. How are we playing, that role here as a city-state? Yeah.
Singapore has so far taken pretty good steps in playing this role. So it's provided a lot of funding and support for startups who are looking at revolutionizing agriculture. So my edible insect company was able to start here with the help of the Singapore government. And the government has been very supportive of these industries in a way that I wish more governments were. So Singapore has done a nice job and can continue to help set itself up to be an important player and to be one of the drivers in technology here.
Wow. And that we can then, with this technology and this understanding and this knowledge, right, use it to
be global experts.
Global export, and then share this with the
then
rest of the world.
commercialize it so that everybody can have an insect burger.
Yes, made in Singapore. So you have been doing insect farming for quite a while, right? But now you mentioned that you are into snail farming. How big is the change to that? Is it like changing from hard rock music to classical music?
Snails and insects are very different creatures. Snails are gastropods, mollusks. Insects are not. They have 6 legs. Snails have no legs, although the bottom part of their anatomy that they crawl on is called a foot. So no legs, 1 foot. Insects, 6 legs, 6 feet. So different creatures, but they're raised in similar ways. They're raised indoors, spatially efficient manners. You have to design a feed for them. You have to make sure that they're happy, get the density right, get the conditions right.
How do you know they're happy?
You ask them.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, hi.
Is it like the turbo? What is it?
Yeah, they have their little eye
Yes,
stalks
yes,
that
yes.
come out.
But how do you know he's happy? I mean, like...
I've spent a lot of time with very little creatures,
knows them.
and as you get to spend time with
Do you
them, you
name
have
them?
signals. Yes.
You give them names?
I don't give them names. Too many to give names. So the biggest difference between snails and insects, or one of the biggest differences, is snails are hermaphrodites, and this is really cool. This means that they have both the male and female genitalia, and so every one of them is able to lay eggs, and then we get higher egg production because of that. So insects, only the girls lay eggs. Humans, only girls have babies. But snails, everyone, both male and female. Snails grow a bit slower also, so that takes more time. Generations take more time. With insects, we don't have to care about individual insects too much because in 2 weeks, it doesn't matter anymore. But snails, if we keep them for a couple months, even a year, then we have to care about the snails. So we have to make sure that they're a little bit happier, make sure that they are... I look at each of the snails more. Sometimes I label them and I come back to the same one after a couple days.
Oh, so how do you determine that the snail is happy? Is it
healthy?
Yeah, healthy. You know, does it grow faster, or you just keep on coming back to you because you equals to food?
I haven't trained him to come to me yet. Maybe that's next. Just come here, snail, come here. Yeah.
Do they really have eyes? I don't think so, right?
Yes. Eyes at the tips of the eye stalk.
That one is eye.
So they really can look at you.
They don't have great vision. They rely mostly on their sense of smell. But yeah, have sets of eyes.
How do you keep them healthy? Yeah, like what are the things to look at when you're doing snail farming?
Yeah, you have to have proper conditions, so proper diet, proper temperature, proper everything else. They like water, but they don't like too much water.
So what's next for you?
I want to make the world a better place, so I want to continue to help agriculture become more sustainable, both for the people and for the planet. But in what exact ways that will manifest itself, I don't know. We'll have to see.
It's the same as Creativeans one. We make the
We
world
also want to make a world better place. I mean, through what we do.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we need more in our world. You know, that like people, you know, especially also the future generation, younger people, you know, with
Hope for the
yeah,
future.
not just about
Taking-
career.
yeah,
And, I
and
mean
taking so much
that
out
is
of
of course
the world, you
yes,
know, but also
that
give
giving back,
back.
right? You know,
Yes,
building a
of
world
course.
a better place. Wow, that's very inspiring to hear. Thanks, Nathan, Laurenz, for joining us today. It's been a very insightful and interesting conversation. You know, you learned a lot about the world of insects. Where can we find out more about this from you again?
Yes, so as part of this same facilities, as part of this same design week, on October 5th, I will be on a panel that you are hosting as well. So
Yes,
you can see
together
more of both of us.
Yes, with Jane Goodall Institute, Singapore. Yes. If you are interested in more of what Nathan has to share about the world of insects, do join us up in the panel discussion, you know, over Singapore Design Week. Thank you very much for joining us. If you liked today's episode, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.